We've all seen a full preschooler in full meltdown mode. Sometimes that's because they're tired or hungry or even hangry. But it can also be because they've misunderstood what adults are saying. Speech and language therapist Christian Wright says there are common ways the preschoolers can misunderstand what grown-ups are saying. And he's here to explain more about how parents can make it easier for everyone. Really interesting topic, Christian. Good morning.
Good morning.
I mean, they just don't know what you're trying to get through.
No, I've made this mistake myself, and I'll give examples. So just because you're a speech therapist doesn't mean you're immune.
It's kind of moved on, hasn't it? I mean, we're often trying to understand what a baby's saying to us, and at some point it's trying to work out what we're saying to them. Okay, just talk through.
Well, there's a whole bunch of areas, and I guess we'll just work through some of them. But one of the more common ones is what we call negatives in grammar. Negatives are like words that we insert into a sentence to express that something's not happening. And children classically misinterpret these at a very young age. So around the age of 1, children begin to comprehend no, and between 1 and 2 they start using it. So it's the first negative that they use. What we mean, other negatives are words like can't, don't, and isn't. Those are just some that children would commonly use in those preschool years. And obviously what happens is we're giving an instruction or something, and we've used a negative. I'll give you an example. So my youngest child is Jesse. He is 2.5, and this goes back maybe 6 to 10 months ago, whatever, making him breakfast in the morning, and he said, no Vegemite. And I said, okay. So I was getting the food ready, and then I said to him, so you don't want Vegemite? And he went, no Vegemite. So immediately I realised he doesn't understand don't yet. So what he heard was, you want Vegemite. So he keeps hearing that when you repeat, you don't want Vegemite. And we fall into the trap of thinking, number one, I'll speak slower. You don't want Vegemite. And the tantrum goes up further. And then we shorten it, don't want Vegemite. And then they just get absolutely psychotic in front of you. And so
now you're at a battle, an unintended battle of wills.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So then, of course, being a bit of a moron, I didn't actually stop to think. And then I suddenly realised, oh, you don't understand the negative. So it's that moment when you want to switch your language. So for me, it was to him, I got the Vegemite. And so the trick is simplify it to what they might understand. And the first is no. So I got the Vegemite and I held it and I said, no Vegemite, and put it behind my back. And he just sat there looking at me. And then I brought the jam across and said, want jam? And he went, yes. So then we were past the tantrum moment. But it was a good lesson to me again of how our intentions we're being well-intentioned, and we're trying to be polite and listen to the child and value them and all those kinds of things.
But you're actually reinforcing their misunderstanding by repeating your misunderstanding.
Yep. And then, obviously, when a child tantrums, you can't help but have a biological response. Your blood pressure goes up. You start to feel stressed out. It's just a normal biological response to a human exhibiting an enormous loud stimuli. And so we react to that, and that sets us off. And then sometimes we'll unintentionally escalate to try and calm them down, which makes no sense.
But my point is, when you repeat the same phrase slower, you're actually reinforcing the misunderstanding, and then it becomes a battle of wills.
It does.
As an aside, at what point do kids in their language development start to understand negatives?
So there is a rough progression. So between 2 and 3, they start to understand don't and can't. And you can test the waters if you dare, but you can try it out from time to time and just see if they're starting to comprehend, because they will.
Are you best to do the full do not or do the ellipsed don't?
Most people say don't.
It's more
do
natural,
not.
isn't it?
It just is. It's just how we speak.
Yeah.
And I haven't actually thought about that. But I think that
and they'll hear the do first before they hear the not. It's quite complicated. We can't be doing grammar with 2-year-olds.
And also, you're usually dropping into that sentence words that are high value, like TV or a food name.
Yeah.
And you're putting that negative in front of it, and all they're focusing on is the thing they want.
It's the stimulus. Okay, keep going. What's another example?
So then moving on from there, so just in terms of what to do, so yes, you can simplify it to no. Another one would be, instead of don't run, just state the behaviour you want. Walk, please. So tell them what you do want rather than what you don't. Sometimes I'll give choice, like you can't have ice cream could be better put as do you want apple or yogurt? So you're just showing them what is available rather than telling them what's not. Moving on, choice making. So choice making is another area that gets complicated. So children around 12 months learn to make choices by looking, pointing, reaching, those kinds of things, or shaking their head for no. And then between 12 and 18 months, they start to understand that when an adult presents something to them, it's actually a choice. You don't have to take it necessarily. It's a yes-no choice. And then between 1.5 to 2, you can present two objects, and the child starts to realise this isn't a gift. So that's the early mistake.
It's an either or.
Correct.
When do they understand inflection? Like apple? Yogurt?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thanks.
What's interesting about that is that early on, the parent will go, do you want apple or cracker? And then the child nods, and then you go into this endless loop, and then the child tries to do a smash and grab and take it all from you, and then you end up in a tantrum. So it doesn't really work that well. So you have to think, does my child understand choice yet and realise it's a choice? So some tips. One is present the choice very wide apart. This helps because then when the child who is decided they're going to do the smash and grab, when the choices are wide apart, you have to reach for one first.
They can only point at one or reach
Correct.
for one.
And they'll usually reach for the one that's most preferred, usually, which means you can then have a head start on, you want whatever it is.
Do you want both present at once, though? Because otherwise it becomes like teasing. If you've
Correct.
got one behind
That's
your back,
right.
it's like you're hiding it from me.
That's right.
So you're signalling it's one or t'other.
And you can sometimes, when the child's not getting it, I will present one, then the other, to show them there's two options, one at a time. Then what I'll usually do, and this is a critical part of it, is I actually want to teach them. So this is around about the age of about 2, I start to show them that there's a preferred and a non-preferred within a choice. This helps the child to learn to think critically about what's being presented. So the order you present it's important. So present the non-preferred item first, present the preferred item second, because children tend to go for the last thing they heard. So you go sock or bubbles. Not that you would do that, it sounds a bit abusive, but anyway. And then they go bubbles. Great, that's a choice, and you give them that. And obviously with sock, there's not much you can do with that. So the child realizes sometimes the parent presents something that's a bit of a dud and something that's useful. Then you reverse that order. So you go bubbles or sock. What you're trying to teach them is follow the word and make the choice for the one you want. Don't just say the last thing that you heard.
Okay, how interesting.
And then you can move on to 2 preferred items. So for many children, you would never go through this process. Just through trial and error, many tantrums and you ripping your hair out, you get there anyway. But this is a way that I teach children who are struggling with choice, or I want to accelerate their understanding of choice.
Or minimise the number of tantrums in your life.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
I'm sick of my blood pressure being too high. So moving on. The next one would be the why because relationship. It's the dreaded why. Most parents cannot.
Why?
It just
But
does their
why?
head in.
But why, Christian?
Yeah. So we're buried in the middle of that at the moment, and he's cottoned onto it early. Not because I'm a speech therapist, nothing to do with that. He just picked it up. I think it's because he's got 5 older siblings, so he hears why a lot because people like to challenge anything a parent says. So moving on, he will go why for a lot of things a lot of the time. So between 3 and 4, children start asking why, and around about 3.5, they start offering or trying to do because answers. It's important because under the age of 3, say around 2.5, you might find a why question is just met with a blank response, or they give you a what answer. So why are you crying? And the child goes, I'm crying. So that's just restating what they're doing. So there's actually a process children pass through as they develop the cause-effect relationship in their language. So how that looks. The child begins very literally, so they need really concrete examples. So how I will teach this is I will show them the link between 2 things. For example, the light switch. The light is on because I pushed the switch. So I'm trying to show them the cause-effect relationship. And what I do is I just model the why-because relationship in these everyday environments where it's really easy to understand. Build a block tower, push it over. Why did the block tower fall down? Because Daddy pushed it, or whoever the child's name is pushed it. And I keep repeating this. I keep recycling it. So the child literally memorizes when I say, why did the blocks fall down? They say, because whoever pushed it.
Such a complex concept when
It's
you
weird.
think of it.
It is.
Cause. Like, that's really stretching a little brain, isn't it?
It really is. And one of the reasons is, up till now, before they develop causation, they live and do, for the most of the preschool years, very much in the present tense.
Yeah. And things just are what they are.
They are. And when you ask someone why, what they actually have to do cognitively is rewind time. Why did the block tower
They have
fall
to
down?
remember what they're
Yeah.
talking about.
So they have to think, what was happening in the last 5 seconds that might explain this outcome? So that is actually quite a cognitive leap.
But they've also not learnt a whole bunch of becauses, a whole bunch
No.
of causes. They're just beginning to get a library of causes.
Correct. So the process they'll usually go through when you do this and you start trying to teach it is they'll restate the outcome. Why did the wall fall down? They'll go, the wall fall down. Then the next step is they'll start to introduce the reason. So they'll go, they won't say because, they'll just say pushed
Daddy
it.
pushed.
Yeah. And then they start venturing into the word because. And it can come out as a cause, which is super weird, but a lot of children do that. Da cause, which is bizarre as well. Cause, and then eventually it becomes because. So there's a process they go through where they refine because. So this is so you have to kind of stick at it. When you find yourself stuck with a child and they aren't getting it, swap. Go to something easier. Instead of asking why, ask a yes/no question or a what question. That's easier for a child to
Cognitive
process.
overload.
Yeah.
And also a sense of achievement, that kind of thing.
Moving on. So conditional language. Conditional language, what I mean by that is the dreaded word if. If is really complicated. If is a little word that means if condition A is true, then do B. So if it's raining, get your coat. Or if you tidy up, we can go outside. So it's a lot more complicated when you stop and think about it. So we have to be careful of these because children don't really develop this relationship and this understanding until around about 4 years of age. So somewhere between 3.5 and 5, but usually around 4, they start to get this. So you can imagine the immediate problem is you say, if you tidy up, we can go outside. And they go, yep. They stand up and start heading to the door, not realizing that condition A hasn't been met. So this is something where we just need to be careful and change a little bit of the way we're interacting. You can still use if, then. It's just that you need to tie it to a solid, repetitive routine so they get to memorize the language, a bit like with the why because. So you do, if we tidy, then this. And you show them, we tidy this, then this.
And should you make them short and simple first?
Correct.
So they don't have to remember, what did you say 5 minutes ago?
Yep.
Yeah. So short, simple example.
That usually works quite well. And when you are tidying, don't make it the massive Lego bag
you
that they've
put
done.
3 blocks away.
Correct.
Well done, darling. Yeah,
So that the schedule of reinforcement is really quick.
Yeah.
So they do a really quick tidy and then they get the outcome.
Very good.
One other thing to say about that would be you want to, if you're really getting stuck, just use first, then. So first shoes, then outside, if they're really just not getting it. And then what you can do by doing that is be very visual with them. So first shoes, and then you show them the shoe. Then you point to the door outside. So that's leading into an if-then later on. So if you put your shoes on, then we can go outside.
What do you do if they don't get it? Do you come back with a nod and go, no, first shoe, then door?
Yeah, and I'll usually then physically prompt them. I'll start helping them.
Put the shoe on.
Correct. So I'll go...
And then
Yep.
door.
And I'll even simplify it further, which comes to the next point, which is just reduce the complexity of your language if they're not getting it. So shoe, then door, then outside.
Mm-hmm.
So then you go shoe on, then outside. So you keep it really, really, really simple. And you help them because you want to get through the trauma of putting the shoe on so you can get to the fun of being outside. Then what happens is, of course, in the child's brain, they develop that link or that relationship.
You mentioned earlier they have to, when they're doing cause and effect, they have to remember something that's just happened. This is where they have to visualise what's about to happen.
Yeah, good point,
So
Kathryn.
again, these are these are cognitive muscles you're just beginning to build. And that concept of time, how good is it in a toddler, by the way?
It's dreadful. And so time words mean very little to a lot of little children. So words like later and soon are a nightmare. And actually, we're responsible because we're so horrendously unreliable. We go soon, we'll go. Soon could mean the next 10 seconds or the next hour. It doesn't really mean much. So children really struggle with it because they're so concrete in their thinking, and time is abstract. You can't see it. what does soon look like? So often what I'll do with these words is try and link it to activities. So instead of soon, I'll say after lunch, or tidy this, so you're going back to your if-then, so this first, then this. So you're trying to keep linking what soon means. It means a particular event has to occur, and then we'll go and do this thing.
I mean, even in older kids, even around school, that kind of concrete stuff is helpful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I often use a lot of visual timers, even with older kids.
Yeah.
There's a great timer you can download off the App Store, and I think it's on Google Play. It's called Mouse Timer, and it's free. And it's graphically illustrated beautifully. So you pick 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and this little mouse appears, and the apples go across the screen, and they represent the time divided into little apples. And the mouse munches his way through all the apples until he gets to the cheese. And when the cheese is gone, the timer goes off.
Just turn over an hourglass.
A sand timer, yeah.
But same kind of concept.
That can work too.
All right, so that's interesting, that time matter and concrete things can come to represent time, hopefully in time. All right. Suffice to say, complex instructions or multi-level instructions are not helpful in this process.
Not really, no.
Get one thing done and then the next and then the next.
And most parents intuitively know this. I think what's useful is just to have in your head an equation, which is you take their age roughly, so between 1 and 2, so say 2, they can reliably follow a one-step instruction. And that instruction begins as a routine instruction they hear all the time, and then more non-routine instructions, so more one-off instructions. But as their comprehension, their vocabulary improves, obviously their comprehension of instructions can improve. The ability to follow instructions is also tied to your cognitive development because your working memory improves. So you can hang on to this information
You've got to hold
for
things
longer.
in your head at once. Yeah.
So a 3-year-old, they can roughly follow a 2-step instruction. And by the time you're 4 or 5, you can have a pretty good go at a 3-step instruction, particularly if it's tied to a routine.
But keeping that language predictable and keeping the action, if you are trying to train them to understand this or that, or because, keeping them repetitive as well. Not you don't want to have 5 different versions of a basic instruction if you could just have one.
That's correct.
A question.
Yep.
Can you ask how to cope with a 2.5-year-old child when they want a bowl or a piece of cutlery? You give them one and they don't like it and then get really upset even when you give one. But it's hard for the parent to understand what they want. The crying just gets more and more. How best to handle this? They want something in the bowl. Is that the issue?
No, I suspect you're encountering your child's personality because I have one in my house, and they're very particular. So, number one, if it's possible, give them as much choice as you can. Although you don't want to give them like 10 bowls to choose from because you're setting yourself up for a nightmare every morning. But you might give them a choice of 2 or 3 bowls. So giving them choice gives them a sense of power and control. So sometimes when we think about these kinds of behaviours, one of the questions we ask ourselves is, why? Why are you engaging in this behaviour? What are you trying to get from it? Or what are you trying to avoid?
Do they typically have a favourite, by the way? Should you just
Some
learn
children
what the favourite
do.
is?
They do. Personality is such a huge thing.
And the other thing is, I know from other experts, they're so funny around food. They're very particular around meal times, and if it's such an intimate thing to be doing, you've had no role in preparing what's about to land in your bowl, so they've probably got some little strategies around the whole thing.
They do, and they are desperate to have some control in the situation. And a classic one would be, in their mind, they know that particular bowl, the food touches, so they don't want it. They want a bigger bowl where the food doesn't touch.
A very good observation here, not a question. Very interesting session on children and their communication with parents, etc. Some very interesting suggestions from your expert. Interestingly, we already use the very same techniques when communicating with our 10 directors on the board in order to help them make their decisions. Usually it works. Sometimes we get the meltdown. We're all just children in grown-ups' bodies. Thank you, Christian Wright.